Released in 2017, The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild is the latest installment in Nintendo's widely popular Zelda franchise. However, Breath of the Wild differs from many of the past games in the series, with the developers breaking many of the traditional Zelda conventions to create a truly open-world experience. In this review, I will be rating Breath of the Wild based on 5 criteria: story, gameplay, world design, sound design, and extras. Set in the fantasy land of Hyrule, Breath of the Wild follows our hero, Link, on his quest to defeat Calamity Ganon, the physical embodiment of pure evil that infests the land. In doing so, he will also save Zelda, the princess who has been relentlessly fighting him while Link was unconscious in the mysterious Shrine of Resurrection for the past 100 years. Right at the beginning of the game, we find out that Link has suffered from memory loss and is unable to recall the events that led to Calamity Ganon taking over a century ago. This means that as you play through the game, and Link slowly learns what happened in the past, so do you, making for an immersive and interesting story. Although a lot of the lore gets explained to you, there are still some mysteries and questions left behind that are open to the interpretation of the player. One of these great mysteries is the Sheikah race, an ancient race of people who created the highly advanced technology left scattered around Hyrule. The very first item you get given in the game is the Sheikah Slate, which, put simply, is essentially an ancient iPhone. This piece of technology is imperative to the gameplay, and yet we are never explicitly told why it was created. The player receives various hints but is left to figure out for themselves the details. This, in my opinion, is a fantastic way of letting the story unfold, further immersing you in it by showing you the information rather than telling you, leaving you to wonder about it for yourself and therefore feel more involved. Due to the interesting and mysterious nature of the story, and the clever way the story and lore unfolds around you, I'm going to give this criterion an 8 out of 10. Breath of the Wild's open-world playstyle leaves for a very free-feeling gameplay experience, even more so than some other open-world games. Throughout the whole game, the player is guided with where to go, given certain quests and instructions, but is overall free to travel wherever they want, leaving the player to experience the game however they so choose and make their own path in the world. That being said, it won't always be easy. There are areas that will certainly be more difficult to access until later in the game, such as areas too high to climb until you've upgraded your stamina, or areas surrounded in enemies that are too difficult to fight until you've gotten better at combat and found better weapons. Speaking of which, the combat system in the game is very well thought out. Various weapons are used in different ways. One-handed weapons good for a rush of faster attacks, two-handed weapons slower but heavier hitting, and spears weaker but good for throwing and more ranged melee attacks. This ensures that if the player is strategic about how they fight and what weapons they use, they are sure to be successful. Every weapon in the game also has a certain level of durability, also requiring the player to consider which weapons they want to save, often requiring them to fight using a less powerful weapon, in turn improving their combat skills. That being said, with a full weapon inventory, constantly having to pick and choose which weapons to keep and which to trade out can get very annoying. Another game mechanic worth mentioning is cooking. Throughout Hyrule, Link can gather various ingredients and bring them to a cooking pot to create a usually delicious meal. It comes down to the player figuring out what works and what doesn't. Some ingredients will give something that only restores 1 heart or less, whereas others can fully restore your hearts and even give you bonus ones. Some ingredients can give you bonus effects, such as a speed buff or stamina restoration. However, if you throw in a questionable mix of ingredients, you may end up with the rather unappealing, and quite appropriately named, dish dubious food. Cooking bots can also be used to create elixirs, which can provide highly powerful special effects and buffs, very useful in a wide variety of situations. One final note, the game is very forgiving towards beginners, giving them plenty of time to learn how the game works and to improve. The game mechanics are taught to the player as needed and when relevant, meaning that the learning curve is far less steep. In my opinion, a fantastic decision, much like many of the other gameplay decisions. All of these game mechanics, and many more, all culminate to a smooth gameplay experience. I'm going to give Breath of the Wild's gameplay a 9 out of 10. The absolute best thing about Breath of the Wild is getting to explore its massive and fantastically detailed world. To give you an idea of just how big this world map is, even with nearly 200 hours on this game, there are still areas that I haven't been to yet. There's always something to discover, whether it be a tower, climbing your way to the top of which will unlock a section of your map, one of the 120 shrines scattered throughout the map, mini dungeons that also act as fast travel points, or a beautiful lake surrounded by glowing forest animals. The player will never be bored. Much like the real world, Hyrule is left at the mercy of Mother Nature. The developers have chosen to include various nature mechanics, such as not being able to climb in the rain and varying temperatures depending on environment, requiring Link to obtain special gear to travel through these areas. The inclusion of mechanics like this add to the realism of the world, giving the player a far more involved and entertaining experience. It makes the game far more interesting and brings a new level of depth to this fictional world. However, a world this detailed wouldn't be anywhere near as good without the stunning graphics to match. Breath of the Wild has a unique art style with some clear anime inspiration, particularly in the character design. Lighting has also been well considered. Shadows under trees providing shade, indoor lighting have a yellow tint, and some items having a slight glow to them, just to name a few examples. The amount of thought put into what we see is nothing short of impressive. Climb up to a high point and you are almost always guaranteed a fantastic view, particularly if it happens to be sunrise or sunset. All of this accumulates into a world that is a genuine joy to play in. I'm going to give this criterion a 10 out of 10. The sound design in Breath of the Wild is extremely well thought out and fits every scene perfectly. Well, almost every scene. The soundtrack features several classic melodies from the Zelda series, such as the Great Fairy Fountain music, as well as many new ones, such as the heart attack-inducing Guardian theme. The mood of each song has been carefully considered to fit its location. Serene locations feature relaxing and pleasant music, and more dangerous places feature a more tense song choice. Monsters and land bosses also have their own special theme that play when you encounter them. Regardless of where you are or what you're doing, you are guaranteed a masterfully composed backing track. This, however, doesn't make some of the tracks exempt from getting a bit annoying after hearing them so many times. Speaking of annoying repetitiveness, while most of the sound effects in this game are fantastic, there are some that you grow to hate, such as the Sheikah sensor. Also worth mentioning, when a monster arm is equipped, it makes a slightly unsettling rattling noise that, if you're not careful, can interrupt your dialogue. However, if you simply disable the Sheikah sensor or not equip a monster arm as a weapon, I mean, why would you? You can avoid these, so it's not too bad. The amount of good sound design in this game far outshines the bad. Just have a listen to the satisfying sound effect that plays every time you open a chest. Every detail has been thought out, and there is a sound effect for almost everything in the environment around you. Chop down a tree? There's a sound effect for that. Hit your weapon against a rock? There's a sound effect for that too. Such fantastic sound design really helps immerse the player in the game, significantly improving the gameplay experience. I'm going to give this criterion a 9 out of 10. A large part of the beauty of Breath of the Wild lies not in the main gameplay, but in the multitudes of other things there are for you to find and do. There are an impressive 76 side quests. Given, most of these side quests are filler quests without a particularly fleshed out story, but that doesn't mean they aren't fun additions to the game. There are 120 shrines in this game, and quite a few of them have attached quests. While it isn't compulsory to complete all the shrines, attempting to do so can be a good goal to aim for after completing the main game. As well as quests, there are also various secrets hidden around the map. This includes the Korok seeds, collectibles that can be traded for more inventory space to store your weapons. Some Korok seeds are acquired by completing mini challenges, such as shooting targets or racing to a point in the distance before time runs out, whereas others are simply hidden under a rock. There are a whopping 900 of these to be found. Whether you're specifically looking for them or just happen to stumble across one, Korok seeds are a fun little addition to the game. There are also a few mini games around the place, such as this bowling one. A final note for this Criterion. There is DLC available. I won't say much about it, but it features several new fun quests and is well worth the purchase if you're looking for more after completing the main campaign. I'm rating this Criterion a 9 out of 10. So, the final verdict. To sum up my thoughts on Breath of the Wild, I would say that it is an absolutely fantastic game, quite possibly one of the best games for the Nintendo Switch. It has a great story, a massive world that is fun to explore, absolutely amazing sound design, and is overall a wonderful experience. I recommend that anyone who can play it should. I'm going to rate The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild a 9 out of 10.